No more snow days, let's hope, huh? No more cancellations, though they say it's going to snow tomorrow. How many we had? 2 already? We don't need any more. You all know who I am. Anybody from the outside here doesn't know who I am, find out. Welcome. I'm just stalling for time. I'm very happy that we were able to resume this panel, this discussion, this engagement that we had to unfortunately cancel due to the snow. Will Chan, come on up here, a graduate of this department.
Well, you're going to clap, really clap, or don't clap. I guess they don't clap.
Has very kindly suggested this, we'll call it talk.
Yeah, definitely a talk.
And very kindly put it together with our 2 guests tonight. All of these people are SVA graduates in one way or another. He still owes me 10%. He owes me 10% too, but he's kind of obligated. But at any rate, they all represent an interest in a domain of our practice. I hate that word, you know that. Domain of our enterprises, of our creative engagements, which, for lack of a better word, we'll call documentary. Or we'll call it personal self-investigation of the real world around us, learning how to look, observe, find out about other people, find out about other people who are like us, and identify with them and make a statement that has lasting meaning and cultural understanding and cultural significance to help others understand the conditions, plight, well-being, etc. of other people. And as you know, in this particular case, it involves Chinese people living in America, Americans who are Chinese, so on and so forth, or of Chinese descent. And it's part of the rich fabric that makes New York and the better part of this country meaningful. And I think they've expanded our understanding. The exhibition of these 2 young men, they are young, is at the Museum of the City of New York, and it closes at the end of March. So if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend that you do see it. And I think it will expand your understanding not only of a culture, but what's possible in the lens of screen arts as a way of looking at others or looking at ourselves. So with no further ado, Will, front and center. Oh, I forgot to introduce Will, because he's going to introduce them more in depth. Will came to us after having been in the commercial world of things, never quite understood what he was doing, after he left the United States military service. But he was actively engaged in some of those crazy things that this country wrought on other people, suffered from the suffering that one suffers from, that occurs to soldiers and those who have to witness and be involved in terrible things, and has sort of devoted his career to understanding more about that. He did a book about it. Has another book coming out. What's the title of the new one?
It's about Chinese American early history.
Wow, big ambitious issue. And Will has been supportive of any number of other photographers and creative lens and screen arts image makers of this program, as a publisher, as a supporter, as an interlocutor. And he continues in his own work, obviously. I'm very proud of what he's done and the publications he's done. He'll tell you more about that. So let's begin.
Thank you. Can we just I'm just going to have a little chairs up, okay?
Yeah.
And then we can just rotate if we need to. I'll send this. So Yeah, just sit down. I have this bunch of notes that I prepare, but I'm really bad at reading and thinking at the same time. So I'm just gonna, because I know it really well, so I'm gonna speak off the top of my head. I think, like I always do. I think when I first pitched this to Charles and Liz, it's important because I sat in your seats years ago. I hate my time being wasted, and I would not pitch this if I don't feel like somehow some of you will gain a lot from it. So I would do my best to give a little, but ultimately it's about meeting us somewhere in the middle and have a discussion. And that's more important to me. Tom and An Rong knows their work inside out. They don't need to talk about it, but hopefully somewhere we could connect. So I'm kind of nervous. I'm usually not, but today I am. So I wrote this out. I literally wrote this out. Thank you everyone for being here. What a turnout. I knew it was going to be great. Thank you to Liz Cito for organizing this and for all the things that you do for the department. Thank you. All right. Charles, are you on your phone? Okay. I'm going to embarrass Charles a little bit because I think it's important. I'm told that this is the 30th year of the department, a department that Charles founded and has provided guidance and care and support for the last 30 years. So we have all been really fortunate to have a moderate amount of success. So we do a lot of interviews, a lot of lectures. But to come back to SVA to do this means a lot to us. It's like coming back home. And at the end of all these talks, usually someone would come up and ask, oh, should I go to art school? Should we go to grad school? Should we go to SVA? And I would be as honest as I can. There's issues with money. There are issues with job opportunities afterwards. How to live this life after you graduate. And I also talk about the really good stuff, which is the unparalleled faculty that this program has. And I'm telling you, bar none, across any discipline, you have the best faculty in this MFA program. No lying to you. But ultimately, if you could figure out the money aspect, I tell people I'm a better person today having came through this department than before I came. And maybe I could have done it in Rutgers, Columbia, Hunter, maybe. But it happened here. And that is because when I came through the doors today, it felt like home again. Home with a family. Charles being a father figure to me, Adam, Seth, Randy, and I could go on and on. I mean, Steele, Graham, they all provided for me beyond education, but also like a family member that supported me, that kept me afloat. So I want to say thank you to Charles and the people you surrounded yourself with the last 30 years. You didn't give me just an education as an artist, but as an education as a person. So this is where you really need to give a round of applause to. All right.
That's all I have to do.
All right. So now that I'm done kissing up, everything I say is true, to be honest. I might be wrong later on, but it is what I mean. All right. So get back to this. It's truly an honor to introduce these two artists. And as Charles mentioned, they have a show right now at the Museum of City of New York. It closes on March 24th. Please go see it. Charles will pay for it if money is an issue. So to my...
It's a pay-as-you-go museum.
Is it?
Yeah, you just give them $1.
Damn.
City of New York.
City.
Their taxes and our taxes.
Yeah, it's a
All right, we got to move this
museum.
along, Charles. We got to keep going. To my immediate left is An Rong Xu. He's a New York City-based photographer and director. He graduated from SVA BFA in 2012. Born in China and raised in New York City's Chinatown, he explores the world around him through his unique cultural perspective. His work is rooted in the beauty of the ordinary, capturing a rich cinematic stillness in his photography and a passionate journey in his films, bringing with him a vision for creating emotional narrative. He shares a deeper look into the lives of his subject with a sense of trust and candor, shown through personal moments and works unspoken. Aside from his personal work, he photographs and directs for such companies as New York Times, Time Magazine, Washington Post, GQ Taiwan, and the History Channel. And to the far left of me is Thomas Holton. He received his MFA from the School of Visual Arts in 2005. His work has been exhibited widely, including venues such as the New York Public Library, the Museum of City of New York, the China Li Xu International Photography Festival, and Sasha Wolf Gallery. The Lambs of Ludlow Street was featured in Aperture and 3 times in the New York Times, as well as numerous other magazines. His first monograph, also named The Lambs of Ludlow Street, was published in 2016, won numerous awards. He currently lives in Brooklyn with his wife and family.
There we go. Hello. I'm going to go first. Before I start, again, would like to thank everyone for inviting me back. It is a joy to be back here. I will parrot exactly what Will says about my education here. I was working as an assistant here in New York City for many, many years, and I would not be the person I am, the photographer I am, and the teacher I am if it wasn't for SVA. So I'm very happy to be back, honored to be back. As much as it might drive you crazy, listen to that man. All right. All right. So it was really Charles was my first crit teacher here. I was not shooting, I was assisting, and you have to work to make money to survive in the city. And I was working and living with friends and just working on commercial shoots, shooting weddings, carrying a lot of bags and loading a lot of cameras with film back at the time, setting up lights, rear with the gear, right? First one on set, last one to leave. But I wasn't photographing. And next thing you know, years go by. And I'm a photographer, but you're not photographing, right? Because you're just assisting, making money just to pay your rent. So I decided that I wanted to go to graduate school, learn a little bit more about photography, explore my own voice much deeper than I had ever before. And so I was lucky enough to get in and enroll here in SVA. I'm from New York City, so I didn't want to leave the city. So it's a great place to be if you're interested in photography. But I'm more than thrilled and happy to be back, as well as cherish my time here back in the day. So thank you. So before I start, I'll tell you a little bit about myself, my journey as a photographer. I'll take questions as you want to go along. I've done this talk a couple times. I kind of get sick of hearing my own voice all the time. So if you have any questions, please, I'll try my best to answer it. But I'm a New York City-based photographer, lived here all my life. I'm half Chinese, half American. My dad is American. My mom is from mainland China. She fled China during the Communist Revolution and fled to Taiwan and eventually fled to Hong Kong and then eventually made it to Taiwan. My dad was a photographer. And so he was in Taiwan photographing and met her. All right. So he brought her over here, fell in love. They came over here. I jumped right into my New York City life as a person here. My dad was from New Jersey, but he had an apartment here in New York City. I jokingly say, and you maybe heard this like 3 times, but I'm Eurasian, right? Okay. So I was, involved in photography, assisting for many years. And when I began to get really, really interested in photography and become really serious about it, which is basically when I started school here, I did not know it at the time, but I did not know why at the time, but I always would load my camera up with film, go to Chinatown. My grandparents lived in Chinatown. I had relatives living in Chinatown, but I lived in Manhattan and then currently live in Brooklyn for the last 20 years. But I'd always just go to Chinatown to shoot. And it really was just an exploration of my Chinese half. Even though I was having dinner all the time there, going to my grandparents' house there, I never felt like I always felt like a visitor. I never felt 100% comfortable with the culture. I unfortunately did not learn Mandarin. All right. My mother tried, but I think by that point I was just too much involved in the New York City life here with my dad's family. But I would go photograph, and I would go down to Chinatown, photograph the streets, just roam up and down as a way to try to connect with the neighborhood that I should feel connected with, but didn't really. Again, even though I was there all the time. So when I started photographing here at SVA and I was shooting the streets, it felt great. I was exploring the streets, shooting, but it felt very superficial. Okay. At the time, it was very surface based. It was the stuff that everyone could see. All right. Charlie could remember these pictures. It was the same things that you and I could see just walking up and down Mott Street, Mulberry Street, all those streets, just the markets, the guys, the fishmongers. It wasn't much beyond that. And I liked it. I enjoyed it. I was getting to know the neighborhood, smiling a little bit, and getting into restaurants a little bit every once in a while. But I was pushed. Again, it was good to have teachers. I was pushed to get a little bit further. Right. So Charles was saying, get behind closed doors. I could take these pictures. You could take these pictures. Everyone could take these pictures. You're just photographing everything on the street that anybody could see. So get behind closed doors. So how do you do that? All right. I have no idea. Okay. So, but I'm in a program here. I have to show work every week to Charlie, breathing down my neck. I'm going to do it. That's the good thing about school. That's the good thing about grad school. I've spent 10 years assisting, not shooting. I know what it's like just to be lazy and not shoot or give up. You could not give up because you have a man breathing down your neck, asking to see new work every week. So through a series of events and series of phone calls, I started working with a housing advocate here in New York City, and I met about 5 housing advocates. I literally just Googled housing advocate in Chinatown, and I got like 5 numbers. I called them up and said, listen, my name's Tom Holton. I'm a photographer trying to get behind closed doors in Chinatown, trying to see what life is like here in this neighborhood, get off the street beyond the surface. And 4 of them were like, there's no way you could come with us. I'm like, can I photograph your clients, basically, right? And 4 of them were like, there's no way you could do this. We're lawyers. We have privileges. There's lawyer-client privileges. And so I understand. But then the 5th one was like, no problem. Okay, so you got to just keep pushing, guys, right? You just keep trying, keep making phone calls. Don't take no for an answer. You're going to take a lot of no's for an answer in your life as a photographer, but you just keep making phone calls. And so I started working with a housing advocate, and I started traveling with her once a week, going to visit her clients. All right, so she was going from home to home and home in Chinatown, visiting the people that she was taking care of, right? Making sure that their housing needs were being met, that they know their rights as renters or just or as citizens, right? So making sure that the heat was fixed, all right? So she went from home to home to home to check on these families. So yes, I'm behind closed doors. It's great, but I'm only there for about 15 minutes. Okay, so I'm behind closed doors. I still don't speak Chinese. She has to explain who this weird guy with the camera is taking pictures, why he wants to take the pictures, and people are not going to relax. How you going to sit if there's some guy photographing your house and he wasn't there until 20 minutes ago? I'm a teacher, guys. I can ask questions, and I'm okay with uncomfortable silence. All right, all right. So how are you going to act? Oh man. All right, here we go. All right, are you going to be natural? Probably not, right? So you're going to sit there stiff like this. So granted, I love being behind closed doors, but I describe it as very thin, right? Broad, right? I was going to 5, 7 different families, but very thin. So instead of going this way, I often say I want to go this way, right? One family, let's do it in depth. So I got very lucky. And then during this family visits, I met a family called the Lambs. And they invited me into their house. I took pictures. Wow, this is great. So I went back the next week with the photographs, right, to make sure you're not coming across as some kind of creepy, person that just took pictures and then you show them and you get some pats on the back. But go back that you're committed, that you want to learn more. I said, can I photograph again? They said, no problem. Shoot. I was like, okay. And then they said, do you want to stay for dinner? I was like, wow, holy smokes. Okay. And so this then became, I knew that was what I wanted to find. So I'll fire this up. Hold on a second. So, all right. So this is the first day I met the Lambs. And this was little did I know that 16 years later, I'd still be photographing them. All right, this is the first day I met the family. The family is 5 people, husband and a wife, Stephen and Shirley, and their 3 children, and that's Franklin, Michael, and Cindy. So this is, I'm honestly telling you, this is the first day I met him. Maybe, I wouldn't say the first frame I made, but probably the first roll of film I dropped on the lambs. All right, so I started going back, and I realized this is what I wanted to find, so I kept going. I kept pushing it. I'll let you know that this is the only black and white picture I'll show you, but my first year at SVA, I shot black and white the entire time. All right, so that's maybe a lesson learned, that I have a year of film, the money spent on film, the money spent developing that film that I don't use. All right, I don't use that anymore, but that's part of the process, correct? To get the A, you got to get through B to get to C, right? So, but I use this because this is literally the first day I met them. And so please feel free to ask questions. I was stuck. I was shooting pictures. I was here at SVA. I was stuck, and then a teacher said, "Why don't you switch to color?" In the back of my head, no, I'm a documentary black and white photographer. That's, the history of photography, man. I'm not going to go color, but I was stuck, right? And most of you guys get stuck, and that's part of being the process. That's part of the process. You're going to get stuck. So I switched to color, and I haven't gone back, realizing that color is information, all right? Color is emotion. Color is information. This is the front door of their apartment. All right, so I started going back regularly, over and over and over. I started paying attention less to their small conditions. They live in 350 square feet, 5 people in 350 square feet. That's maybe, right around here. They don't have a bedroom. Well, they don't have multiple bedrooms. They have 1 room, and they don't have closets. So you're not allowed to complain about having the small closets. They don't have 1. All right, but I began to pay less and less attention to that. So this is their bedroom. I started photographing them again regularly, started participating in everyday family things with them. I got put on the legal list of people that could pick up their children at school. All right, so I would get there and the mother would be like, "I have to go shopping. You go pick up the kids." I was like, okay, I guess I'm a babysitter now, right? But it's what I wanted to do. It's life. It's what you do in that neighborhood, or what you do in Brooklyn, where you do in New Jersey. You go pick up the kids and go shopping, all right? So this is the bedroom. This is that first 3 beds jammed together. This is a family portrait, the one of only portraits I use that's kind of like I put it together and staged it. If you look carefully, that's Stephen, Cindy, Franklin, Shirley, and Michael. You can see that this is their living room / kitchen / bathroom. That's over there. You're seeing it. That's where the bathtub is also. This is one of my favorite pictures, just because it's representational of them. They just happen to be wearing the USA sweatshirt, as well as her red, white, and blue sweater. What I like about this picture a lot is that there's 5 of them, and it was a co-student here at SVA that said, "Well, I love this picture because there's 6 plates. There's 6 table settings. So who's the 6th?" Okay, so it's pretty special to me, and I didn't even notice that. All right, so this project's been going on for 16 years. This is obviously them getting pretty comfortable with me. There's Shirley just watching over the kids. This is the view from the roof. They use their 5th floor walk-up as kind of a playground. All right, so I'd go up there. This is what you do on a nice summer day. You dry your laundry up there. That view is no longer there because they are completely surrounded by glass steel towers and gentrification. So that view is gone. Any questions? We good? All right, so I started paying, again, less and less attention to their small closets, or lack of closet space, I'm sorry. Their bathtub in the middle of the living room, which is what kind of drew me to the project in the first place, right? Drew me to the neighborhood. I want to see what life is like. And I started paying more and more attention to facial gestures, them as people, who they were. This is eating dinner and is looking up, and Steven's just kind of just staring me down. I like how his hand mirrors Franklin's hand also. And if you see in the mirror in the corner, you can see the daughter, their neighbor, and their mom. So this is quite early. This is when I'm still in SVA. This is 2004 or 5. This is Shirley watching Chinese soap operas while tenderizing pork for dinner. So upon graduation, I was kind of burnt out with this, kind of over talking about it. wanted to try something new. I spent about 4 years doing some other projects, still living here in New York City. I took a break. Sometimes you have to take breaks. Sometimes you got to cleanse the palate a little bit and move on to something else. I was still photographing around neighborhood in Chinatown, just trying to do different things. But I kept in touch with them. I saw them regularly, maybe once every few weeks, every 3 weeks. The main bulk of the project I just showed you so far, that was once or twice a week for 2-3 years. But I kept in touch. I always knew I wanted to photograph them again. This is 2010, but I wanted to make sure that you told a new story. All right. So you want to make sure you tell a new story and not repeat yourself, because you don't want to repeat yourself, because I find that boring. All right. So I kind of knew what was going on in the family, was still seeing them, but not photographing. And then I kind of felt the shift in the family a little bit. The parents started bickering a lot more, and the kids became teenagers, which has their own kind of issues. So I started photographing again. So this is about 4 years later. In 2008, the father lost his job in the kind of the Great Recession. So Shirley, the mom right here, took a job taking care of an old lady as a home health aide. So this is no longer in Ludlow Street. Now we're roaming around. This is still in Chinatown. This is Henry Street. So this is at the patient's house. So I started shooting again. All right. So life has changed. The picture's gotten the tone in the family were heavier. The atmosphere was a little heavier and lonelier. Keep your eyes open and keep your hearts open to what's happening around you. Keep it, follow the stories of the people you're photographing. Keep emotionally attached to the people you're photographing, and kind of just be engaged. Okay, stay engaged. So this is her on a break time. We are now much older now. The kids are older, they're teenagers. It becomes your own little, there's a lot of physical changes, but they broke up the bed. All right. One of the things I didn't notice is that the 3 mattresses put together were now a series of bunk beds and curtains. All right. So what I saw was, yes, the family was kind of breaking up, but also the physically as well as emotionally. So their parents were breaking up. They were fighting. The father would go out on Friday, come back Sunday. They were bickering a little bit, and then they pulled this bunk bed structure up. And so I kind of put 2 and 2 together. All right. So so they're breaking up emotionally as well as physically. She's a remarkable person to photograph. Okay, this is Stephen with Michael on the upper bunk. Right. So I now switched to digital. All right. The first batch was all film. It's a happy moment, I suppose. I broke my film camera, and I got a $1,500 repair bill for a camera that was going kind of brand new online for $500. So sometimes decisions are made for you. All right. So that's the father. He increasingly became lost online. He just plays a lot of games by himself. This is at a friend's house. That's Franklin. All right. So now here you can see a little bit more of the heaviness and isolation and what's going on in their home. This is Ludlow Street. They put this curtain up. I'm squished in a bunk bed. There's a bed above me. I'm sitting on a bed. There's a bed behind her. You can see the boy kind of peeking out, and you can see dinner over there. But things definitely got heavier. This is a dinner for 7. This is actually at the old man's mom's house. No, old lady's son's house. I'm sorry. So I no longer just strictly went to Ludlow Street. I'm done with school now, right? I'm doing this on my own. I would call them up and be like, "Where are you?" And they're like, "Oh, you have to go to Confucius Plaza today. Let's go." Now you have to go to Henry Street. Okay, let's go. So I hardly saw the father as much because he was kind of breaking up. But the kids always gravitated towards the mother because that's where dinner was always being served. There's the 103-year-old lady's 80-year-old son. Yeah, this is his apartment in Confucius Plaza. This is on Henry Street. So as I was continuing photographing, she kind of grew into this really incredible young lady. There's the old lady in the background. This girl's incredible to photograph. I love it. right? And she loves it too. She's off in college right now, so it's been a little bit challenging. I'm not shooting as much, but she's a great child. But this was a beautiful July day where, man, you should be outside. And this is her playing on her phone. So what I did was kept shooting, stopped shooting, kept in touch emotionally with what was going on. And then I felt the need to start photographing again. The father was increasingly left isolated. He would come home from work, and the kids would go to mom wherever she's cooking. So I made it an effort. I made it a priority to see him every once in a while also. So this is back at Ludlow Street. Just before he proceeded to take a nap. So they're a little comfortable with me around. All right. So I became kind of not a fly on the wall because they know I'm there. Right. So I described myself as the weird uncle with a camera. Cindy described myself. She's like, you're just more like an older brother, weird older brother. So I kept in touch. Yeah. No. So this is Stephen. And he proceeds to move out. All right. So I stopped for a year. I photographed for another 3 years, 4 years. And then I stopped for a year. And then he eventually moves out and he gets an apartment in New Jersey. So I start photographing again. All right. So that middle batch we just looked at, that's when the family was really tense. Okay. Their parents were breaking up. The kids are growing up. They're teenagers. They don't want to be next to each other. They got curtains going on. They got bunk beds going on. No one talks about their emotions, right? So you just kind of just know something's not right. So I stopped. But when he moved out, I started photographing again. And then I started hanging out with them again as family, right? I was still hanging out with them. And all of a sudden the father was there. They're fully divorced. Now the parents are divorced. And the father would meet us at dinner. And it was all, I wouldn't say all laughs, but it was definitely, the animosity was gone. So it was kind of like, the new normal. Unfortunately, right? 50% of people get divorced in this country. So I started photographing again. This is Stephen's walk-in closet. So I picked her up and her older brother and drove to Stephen's house in New Jersey. And she was blown away that he had a closet that you could walk into. And so she was in there and I asked her to hold it. She's an amazing, again, person to photograph. She will hold for me for a long time. I would say, stop, hold on for a second. And she'd just stand there and just kind of, give me looks. Then she opens her mouth and then you realize she's 15 years old. This is back at Ludlow Street. You can see the father's back there. This is the middle son has a kind of not a very good student, has video game problem. And he was not going to school. All right. So he was not really going to high school at all. And he was getting a kind of a stern lecture here. She made the decision to move in with the old lady she was taking care of. And then this is when the father's moving to New Jersey. So who's living with the kids? Nobody. All right. So that was a very interesting decision. I will reserve comment on some things, but you don't leave. I don't think you should leave a 17, a 16, and a 14-year-old by themselves and expect them to do their homework and do things and be responsible, especially when you're that close and, you can't escape. This is the daughter's always kind of entwined with her mother. So you can see Franklin on the video game there. So you can see that's a bunk bed here. There's a bunk bed on top. And I'm not too sure I am. They change their apartment all the time. I was there last week and they changed it again. So which is actually really great as a photographer, because why? New visuals, all right? So it was always going there. Oh, look at that. You changed the bedroom, okay? New things to look at. One of my favorite things about that very first picture I showed you about that red door, or do you remember that picture in the red door? All right, that was made about a year and a half after I started doing this project. All right, so what I love about that picture is what's behind that door. Hey, know. Easy. All right, people's lives, right? Well, all behind these doors are people and people's lives and stuff like that, all right? And also what I like about that picture, and I'm going to wrap up soon, is that I took that a year and a half after I started doing this project. So that tells you as a photographer, guess what? Keep your eyes open all the time. Something could happen when you just don't, when you walk, I walked by that door 50, 70 times and the light was hitting it just the right way. That one day the door was open on the top leading onto the roof and the light was coming in and I noticed it. I'm still photographing in Ludlow Street. I was there last week. I firmly believe as a photographer that if you keep your eyes open and you have your heart in the right intentions and you go there with with your right approach, you could constantly see things. There's never sometimes like, oh, I can't photograph this. There's got to be something if you keep looking. So this is Michael was very successful in terms of going to a very good high school here in the city. He did it all on his own. And this is 5 days before he goes off to college. This is at Grandma's house on Houston Street. They do not have a car. My wife has a car, which I suppose is half my car, but I don't never drive it. But I drove him to college because he needed a lift. So this is his first day of college. I drove him up there. Loved the blank walls. Kind of a blank slate. Here we're off. So basically for like the last 5 years, I've mostly photographed her. She's been my entry point with Michael up in college. She's fantastic again at photograph. And she responds to my texts. Right? So other people don't. So she was still in high school. So I would say, can I meet you Tuesday? I work full time. I have a full-time job, people. All right. So after my work, I would say, can I meet you after school at your home? And she would say yes. And 98% of the time she'll be there. I love the Supergirl shirt because she's a great kid. And I love my favorite thing about this photograph is her finger on the key in the keyboard. The weird, as Charlie would say. This is Michael coming home from college. He looks 1,000 times more confident. I'm pretty sure he suffered from undiagnosed depression. Always reading. Very smart kid. But now you can see how the bunk beds are kind of all put up. One of the few pictures that are outside of Ludlow Street, or at least outside of Chinatown. This is, I took her swimming, and we went swimming at a public pool down on I don't remember. It's Lower East Side somewhere. And guess what? We were on the other side of the street, all right? So you're walking back home, you notice on the other side of the street, there's what? Light. Let's go walk on that side of the street, okay? Keep your eyes open. We were on the other side. I said, there might be something over there. So these are the most recent pictures. This is the last picture in the book that Will was mentioning, because for me, I put this at the very end of the book, after acknowledgments, after the credits and all that kind of stuff, as a way to kind of take a little bit of tension out of it a little bit, right? She's outside, it's airy, it's beautiful, take a little tension out. What I'm happy about the show that we're involved with up in Chinatown is that I'm showing new work, all right? The pictures in the book, frankly, I'm kind of sick of looking at. But I'm still shooting. And so people always ask, hey, you're still going to continue doing this? Of course, life goes on, right? Life continues, right? I have a child now. I have a full-time job, but I'll continue doing this as much as I can, because life doesn't stop just because a book comes out, or life doesn't stop because you have a show. This has evolved into something that's way beyond just a photo project. I hate using that term, photo project, all right? This is something that's, part of my life now. This is ingrained in my life. I go visit the lambs. All right. So what I find most interesting about this project for you guys, or at least for me as a photographer, is what began as a black and white documentary project here in SVA on the streets of Chinatown turned into this. Something much more personal, much more emotionally connected to something that is no longer a photo project. This is me. All right. This is what I do. This is Stephen now. He lives in the Bronx now. So that's up in the Bronx. I make sure to try to see him as much as I can. This is from this past summer. This is 1 month before college. This is at Grandma's house. I love the calendar in the back because it gives you the date. July 24th, 2019. And I love her that she just crawled onto her mom's lap. And guess who drove her to college? So I drove her to college too. All right. I can't drive one and not drive the other. Unfortunately, she goes to school really far away. So that was a healthy 7-hour drive with 2 people that don't drive. So you're driving like that. But this is the day we moved her into college. And I love the fact that you can see her name on the door. And so there was no qualms whatsoever about me taking her to college. Oh, I'm driving to college. I'm bringing a camera. And of course, you bring the camera. So this will be the last image I'll show. This was this past Christmas. So this was maybe about 2 months ago. Everyone's home for Christmas. Michael's home from Christmas from college. Cindy's home from college. And Franklin, the boy in the upper bunk, is a little bit of a lost soul. Great kid, but he didn't go to college. He barely finished high school. he's kind of working kind of side jobs, knickknacks here and there, but he's a good kid. You can't tell right now, but there's a person sleeping in that red blanket, Franklin's girlfriend. But this was Christmas, maybe whatever that was, 2 months ago. So what I wanted to do in closing, I guess, is just reiterate certain things about photography, who I am as a photographer. Again, what started off as something that was just a street photography project turned into this. That's because I listened to the people in this room, in this building. All right. It was way too easy not to do work. It's way too easy to sit there and watch TV. All right. It's way too easy to I don't know how to get behind closed doors, but you're paying for this education. You have to show work. At least I had to show work to that man every week, and I'm doing it on my own dime. I'm going to do it. Right. I'm going to do that because I want to get better as a photographer. I entered graduate school at 32 years old after assisting for 10 years. So I knew what I wanted. I wanted to be here. So that's my project. It's still continuing. Again, it's turned into something it's ingrained. She's the flower girl at my wedding. All right. So I don't have any brothers or sisters. So I don't have a little niece. So we needed a flower girl because I guess you need to have a flower girl. I don't know why. Right. So you need a flower girl. So I got this little girl to be my flower girl. All right. So in 2007, I got married, and the little girl from my photo project is coming up on the most important day. And that's pretty incredible, So, of course, I'll continue doing this. I'm really interested in about watching the kids grow up, who they're going to turn into. All right. As adults, I'm a father myself. My kid is growing up. And what's more special than that? Right. Seeing how kids grow up. So I'll end right now. And thank you very much for that. If you have any questions, I'm sure we have some questions. I don't know how we do this at the end. All right. So Charlie's the boss. So thank you very much.
Yeah. I'll just take it Hello, everybody. My name is An Rong. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Will, for having me. Thank you, SVA. So it's really fun to actually follow up Tom's work, because Tom took this approach of getting as close as possible, and I'm kind of on the opposite spectrum a little bit. So a little background. I grew up in New York City's Chinatown and also in Elmhurst, Queens. My family's been in America since the 1800s, but we directly came over in the 1980s. So my family's been kind of broken off by American legislation. So I have all these questions about my own identity and who I am as an American person with Chinese cultural roots. So while I was in my BFA in 2012, I started this project about America, but through a Chinese American's lens. So for me, a lot of it was trying to kind of recreate or bring back memories of what my childhood was, and things that I saw in my childhood and things that I felt I missed out on while growing up, or things that I kind of had a familiarity with, but was completely removed from as I started getting older and removing myself from the neighborhood. And so in this work is kind of a culmination of a visual litany of what I would call my Americans. So this first picture is at a beauty pageant. And when I was a kid, this is actually the Chinese school in Chinatown. And this is where I used to go for assemblies to hear about the great Chiang Kai-shek, according to my teachers. And while it's kind of a multi-purpose room within Chinatown, and it's turned into a big gathering hall to host really weird pageants like this. Part of what I do is I spend a lot of time just kind of observing my own life in regards to milestones and things that are happening. So this was my maternal grandmother after my maternal grandfather passed away. And so we were kind of in this scheme of life that we're just going up and downs. And that's kind of part of the American story. Becoming American is kind of, you're kind of lost in this world of milestones and things that happen to you because your life is here now. So this project has brought me to really kind of explore my own sense of who I am, and that involves being really lonely a lot. And that's kind of part of the immigrant experience, is kind of building this loneliness within a new country that you've never had growing up. And part of it was kind of finding my place within meeting people and finding things that I could relate to. And that involves meeting friends and meeting new people in new places. So I made this in Seattle with this half Chinese, half American woman who's a singer-songwriter. And I find these people just through social media, through friends of friends. Facebook's awesome. So in China, when you grow up in Chinatown, one of the biggest things you notice is the kids hanging out at Grand Park on Christie and Grand Street. And when I was growing up, because I grew up in, I went to high school in Brooklyn, I avoided all the Chinatown kids while I was in high school. So while I was in school here, I kind of forced myself to get really uncomfortable and hung out with teenagers for my junior year of trying to figure out what I was doing with my work. And that involved going to the park, and these girls are there every day just chit-chatting after school and kind of waiting for their boyfriends to finish playing handball. This is a shop in Brooklyn, but so I just find fun facts and things, and I consider Barack Obama Asian because he grew up in Hawaii and he grew up in Indonesia as well. But we have a lot of these associations, and a thing that I see is that Chinese people love plastering things on top of each other to kind of create this hodgepodge of and collage of their lives. And you can also see that like these two characters, one's holding the Benjamins and one's holding the Maos. A big part of Chinatown is the aging population. And so for me, I see a lot of this older generation that were friends with my grandfather and things where they still come out for the parades and just wear their pins and wear their ties. And, you know, we don't really dress like that anymore. This is Brian, aka Buddha. He was really scary when we first started photographing, and I became friends with him, and we played handball while his girlfriend was waiting for him to finish playing handball. A big part of the so there's a few like big parades that happen in Chinatown every year, and this was on October 10th. Does anybody know what October 10th represents? That's when the founding of the Republic of China happened in 1911. And so that is a parade that's celebrated in only a few places in the world, which is Taiwan, New York City, and San Francisco occasionally, and Boston. Because this is going into the further history of the Chinese people in America, is that a lot of the original funding for the revolution came from Chinese American money, and also a lot of the Chinatowns were built by the Kuomintang, who were the ruling party that went to Taiwan after the Chinese Civil War. Well, after they lost the Chinese Civil War. So these kids are part of this fife group called the Crimson Kings, and the funny thing is they really have no idea what they're marching for, and that they're in this huge political agenda by Chinatowns to push the democracy within the greater China. And meeting different people like my friend Ray Chow here, who's a naval officer. And again, so one of the things that I really looked into while I was working on this project is just kind of how to illustrate the American experience. And one of the big things is we love parades. And so I went to a lot of parades while photographing so far. This was during a New Year's parade, and this is part of the later wave of Chinese immigration. These are folks from Fujian, and they are another regional Chinese group that came to America after the 1990s. And if you look to the right, you'll see that it's waving the People's Republic of China flag, which is the 5 stars. And we built our lives in America in this big sense that we were building for our future generations through menial jobs like owning restaurants. And this was my uncle's restaurant in Jerome, Idaho, which for those of you who don't know is 2 hours from Boise, Idaho, which I hope most people might know is the capital of Idaho. And if you don't know where Idaho is, not many people do. And so there's always needs for like the ethnic community when you build it out enough. And when I was just wandering, I was just trying to find this understanding of life through my photographs and finding meaning through the things that people do to survive. And at the end of the day, a big part of like what I gravitate towards is experienced moments in life while also just like weird things that happen within the community. This was the Miss Chinatown USA pageant in San Francisco. And I didn't realize there was a Miss Chinatown. And there is, but that one's not backed by the larger branches of the Miss Chinatown pageant. This was the ones over here are backed by the Hong Kongers who do a more Hong Kong style pageant. This was more of an American style one with an actual bathing suit. This was in Texas. Nothing more to say other than Texas. And there's a large Taiwanese community there. And it also gets really controversial when you ask if somebody's like where they're from and they look ethnically Chinese and they speak Chinese, but then they say, oh, I'm Taiwanese. So there's like all these layers that you peel back about like this identity that gets really convoluted in a bigger sense of figuring out, well, on top of it, am I American? I worked really hard for this one. This is my Chinese American cowboy, Ryan. We met in Oakland, California, and Ryan and I really kicked it off right away. And I told him I was on my way to the Grand Canyon because I've never seen the Grand Canyon. So he decided to join me, and we drove I forget how many hours. It was maybe 16, and we drove together all the way to the Grand Canyon, and we made it to see the sunrise.
You have to learn how to drive in order to be a photographer.
That is really important. The best way to make photographs is on your feet and with a car occasionally. This was my uncle's restaurant in Jerome, Idaho. Yeah. Cash only. How many of you have been to Chinese restaurants and realized we love cash? This restaurant loves cash, Jesus, and making sure the time is correct. No, huh? And the date. Cash only twice. This is another friend that I met through like just random followings, and part of it is kind of me illustrating this sense of in-betweenness of our identities, because we're always I grew up kind of hating being Chinese because the majority of the kids in Elmhurst, Queens, where I was going to elementary school from 4th to 8th grade, kind of made me feel that my dad, who's a chef, was kind of a loser because he was a chef and he couldn't speak English. So it kind of like got to me as a kid. You know, kids are really cruel as human beings. They say the most ridiculous things, and really like I've been scarred ever since. But I've learned to grow through my work and through a little therapy that I can be proud of who I am. This is Mr. Feng. He makes the best Chinese barbecue or Cantonese barbecue in Chinatown. And when I remember him as a kid, and when I was a kid, he just got to America and he had opened up a fishball cart in on Hester Street. And when I was commuting from Queens to Chinatown to go to school, he and his wife would sell us fish balls in the morning with steamed rice rolls. And now he runs this Chinese barbecue empire on Christie Street. And again, we do, like, as Chinese people in America, restaurants was the easiest way to get into making a living and fulfilling our dreams. Fun fact, Jennifer Lee once said this: there are more Chinese restaurants in America than McDonald's, Wendy's, and Burger King's combined. You go to any small little shop, like small little town in in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, you will find a Chinese restaurant. And somebody's willing to do it because they love their family enough, or they love this idea of survival or this dream enough that they're willing to build their home in nowhere just to feed people. And feeding people, in a sense, is another form of love and another form of trying to provide. This was during a Chinese New Year celebration, and for me, I'm really attracted to PDA because I never really saw PDA as a kid, unless it was from the teenage kids who were hanging out at the park. And then I was like, oh, that's what I want when I grow up. Funny story. My mom tried to set me up with this girl in this photo. When I was in Hong Kong, she tried to pimp me out and be all like, hey, my friend has a daughter who's really cute and I'd like for you to meet her, which is code for, hey, please marry her. And she ended up coming to America and she ended up marrying this guy. And then I was like really relieved that my mom wasn't pushing it on me. And she was like, hey, you're like one of my only friends in America. Would you like to come photograph my wedding or come hang out? And so I ended up in San Francisco hanging out with her during her wedding day and just kind of photographing this experience, because this is another milestone within the idea of like our Chinese American life. Like, this is our life that we're building up, and people have to go through this, and part of our traditions are kept in this. Like this umbrella thing, the idea for in a Chinese wedding is when the bride comes out, the sun is not supposed to touch her, because it's to pay respect to the heavens, because even though it's your big day, the heavens are bigger than you. This was the ugly wallpaper that hung in my parents' room until like 5 years ago when they decided to rip it down. But for me, like, it was kind of a childhood memory of this greater landscape that we built in our home. And it was their way of kind of seeing the world in a bigger way without actually having to go out to see the world. This is on Madison Street. I was working as a summer camp counselor after graduation from SVA. I was trying to just make some money for the summer to buy film and shoot. This is during a lunch break. I would notice that these women hung out at the windows every day. And it was super hot during the summer. And in these old tenement apartments, it can get really steamy. And some people can't afford to have air conditioning. And so they hung out by the windows because that's the breeziest point of the apartment. And one day I finally brought my camera and I took this photo. And then they noticed me taking the photo and I never saw them again. So again, the whole concept of food plays a big part into identity for Chinese Americans, because this is salted fish, fish that's been like salted and and dried and preserved so that you can eat it over a long period of time rather than having to have a fresh fish every day. This was my mom's kitchen. My mom salts her own fish, and she keeps it inside because she's afraid the white people next door would complain about the smell. So again, I spend a lot of time just kind of wandering and not getting too close to everyone, but kind of noticing things. And for some reason, this light on this one street in Chinatown is always beautiful at either 5 a.m. or 5 p.m. So one day I just went twice, once at 5 and once at 5 a.m. and then 5 p.m. And then this was at 5 p.m. So a big part of this project had to move west because I was spending a lot of time in the East Coast, and then I was like, oh, whoa, there's a whole nother world of Chinese people in the West Coast, and they're totally different from us, East Coasters. They've had generations built, they've had like their homes for generations, and now I want to see what it is, what's like over there. Controversial. This is actually called Ranch 99 Market, even though they write 99 Ranch Market. So if you meet any Chinese Americans from LA, they're always going to tell you it's Ranch 99, even though it reads 99 Ranch. This was a huge thing on Subtle Asian Traits Facebook group, and it was a huge argument. So just letting you know. Subtle Asian Traits, it's like a huge Facebook group that like everybody just talks about how they love being love eating boba. So a big part of like this was also kind of exploring. So I spent a lot of time also exploring old Chinatown and older folks. And so I started kind of realizing that I need to spend time with younger folks. And this was when I was doing an artist in residency in Boston. And I just kind of started wandering into the big party scene of Asian American kids who are finally getting to party after spending all those years like studying to get into college. Then I also went to old people parties in San Francisco. This was a junior high school reunion for this group of friends who were friends since like the 50s. And again, it's just kind of me wandering around and like finding my place within where I was experiencing life. This is Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee avoided me for about a year. This was on Dorier Street, and Mr. Lee often came down at the same time every day to smoke his cigarette. I noticed it, and every time I'd approach him, and at this point, I was in the realm of, okay, do I ask him for a picture or do I just take his picture? And there's different approaches for different times. And this time I actually asked to take his picture. And Mr. Lee usually never said yes. He always said no. But on this day, on Chinese New Year, Mr. Lee was wearing his double-breasted suit, his tie, his Kangol hat, and he said, yeah, go ahead. So Chinese people love opening businesses like barbershops right next to other barbershops. And you'll have like this one whole street that's like dedicated to just barbershops in Chinatown. And this is Pell Street. I call this my Edward Hopper moment because it's like really Americana in a sense. And like it's kind of building on this idea of like it feels small town, but it's still not small town. But it's just one of those memories that I have. One of my favorite things to do in the world is to get my hair cut. Wherever I go, I like to get my hair cut. It stems from my grandfather. He used to take me to get my hair cut when I was a kid. And since he's passed, the times that I go get my hair cut, I feel like I'm having conversations with my grandfather. This is in LA, again, exploring the West Coast Chinese Americans. They're very different from me. So who knows what Journey to the West is? Journey to the West? Yeah, the Chinese story. So Journey to the West was this story about a Buddhist monk who takes on 3 students who help him go to India to retrieve the sutras to help spread Buddhism amongst the Chinese people in the Middle Kingdom. Anyway, this is in Vegas, where they built a statue of the Buddhist monk who went west to go get the sutras. But funny enough, this is going west in America. Also notice that it's in like blatant gold, and they tried to make it as shiny as possible. Again, like I'm really drawn to loneliness and things that we kind of part of the immigrant experience, again, is isolation and kind of feeling that you're doing everything for somebody who you can't really physically see, but you're doing it in good faith, knowing that you're trying to provide a better life for somebody. So really like just 5 p.m. light. This was an altar at so we like to pay respect to our ancestors. This is my a house that I got like entrance to in San Francisco, and somebody built this altar for their ancestor. Again, at the Miss Model Angel beauty pageant, where you have to be 18 to 30 years of age, non-smoker with slight tones of Christianity built in. This is my cousin Sean, who I met at my grandfather's funeral, and I didn't realize I had a cousin named Sean. And then I found out that Sean was actually in a FUBU ad back in the 90s, where he was grabbing a woman's behind, and it became very popular for him because he got a lot of work out of it. This is one of those cultural things where every time there's like a big holiday, like there's two sweeping time, and then there's the spring festival, and then there's the autumn festival, and a lot of it for Cantonese folks, at least, this is me speaking as a Southern Chinese person, that we boil a chicken, we boil some pork belly, cook a fish, and we pay our respects to the heavens to let them know, hey, thank you, we're surviving, and we appreciate it. This was at the funeral of Detective Wen Jian Liu, who was killed by a random gunman in 2015. And so I knew that like there were Asian cops and there were Chinese American cops. I didn't realize how many they were. So I ended up going to the funeral, just kind of trying to find myself within this story and kind of find out more of who would show support for this like fallen police officer. This is a cemetery in New Jersey. So one of my favorite photos from Robert Frank's The Americans is this photograph of a Chinese cemetery in San Francisco. And it's like, there's a knocked over funeral bouquet, and there's a knocked over flowers with this grave that looks really untended for. And that kind of really spoke to me in the sense that in his entire book, this is the one mention of Chinese people. This is during the Spring Festival a few years ago when it snowed during the spring. And this is paying respects by bringing an entire roasted pig. Another moment during the Spring Festival. And I think this is my last image, but this is a family portrait of my friend's family, the Tang family. They never had time to actually come together to take a proper family portrait. You start, like, as I started working on this, I started realizing how there's so many luxuries that people don't realize that they have, and a family portrait is a huge luxury. And so rather than find time to do it, they gathered all their passport photos and made a collage into this one family portrait. And that is I.
Hello, this is working. Okay. I'm just going to say a few things before we do a quick Q&A. And I actually want to say quick. We could go as long as like we can. Man, I just froze for a second. What was I going to say? Hello. So this event is a little different than the ones that we have done in the museums and things like that. And it's because we want to make sure that on top of telling you the work, which you would then kind of digest over time, we want to emphasize how relationships gets built between artist, student. So when I was a student here, I went to Charles and I said, you know Thomas Holton? I love The Lambs of Ludlow Street. And then I was like, how come there's no book? And Charles is like, well, email him. I don't know. And I emailed Tom. And I think it was my first year. I emailed Tom, or maybe even my gal year. Do they still call that? And Tom, we met up, and then we started figuring out why there's no book for Lambs, which has been featured in so many places. So as a first year student, me and Tom collaborated, and then we figured out that the best way to go was through a big publisher. And in a year or so, the book came out. And then I wasn't just a student. You know, we're all peers. Everyone here is a peer. And most of the things that happens is through these relationships. And of course, you have to make good work. Don't get me wrong, you have to make good work. But there's also 1,000 other artists right outside the street in New York City that makes really good work. So you need to like maximize the opportunity. So the reason I say this now is in every event, there are usually a few people who want to ask us something, but don't for whatever reason. Please do. If you don't speak to us today, reach out to us at any point through an email. And I've had a few emails, communications with somebody. Please reach out, collaborate, advice, whatever it is. I mean, we love to do that. We all basically, you know, we work. We've been through your journey about 5 years later. So I might not have answers for you, but I definitely have one example for you. And maybe I will learn something from you as well. My last thing I'm gonna say is, I do a lot of curating, I do a lot of publishing, things like that. And there's always a question of what's good art and what's bad art. And it's subjective. You would never have a absolute answer. But when I think about why I love Thomas' work so much, is because he revealed a truth for me. And if art can reveal something that's truthful, expand your truth, I think that's really damn good art. And in An Rong's work, he reminds me of me. I feel the yearning for love in his work. And ultimately, that's exactly what we all want, right? I mean, we all want the same stuff: love, war, death. That's all we really, in the end of the day, that's what we want. And I think love is at the top of it all. And I share that urge in you. And that's why I love, I advocate his work. And at the end of the day, I'm telling you, these two artists will be among the best and most prominent writers of the Chinese American history, no doubt. So, anyone have any questions? Why are you all laughing? It wasn't a joke. Yes.
So, other like draw inspiration from like painters or cinematography.
I love watching movies. So part of my upbringing is I watched a lot of Hong Kong television dramas and Hong Kong movies. So my favorite directors are from the Taiwanese New Wave. So I love Ho Xiaoshen's films. I love Edward Yang's films. Wong Kar-wai, obvious choice there. And Andrew Lau, who directed Young and Dangerous. That is probably on my list of like visual references and visual things that I go after all the time. And anything that Mark Ping Lee has ever done.
Speak up. Yes. How much do you reveal like to the people that you're photographing like that you say to us, like that you revealed about their life to us, and how did they like think about that?
They're incredibly open with me showing the work. I'm not exactly sure of your question. It's just
Like when you're photographing them, how aware are they?
Oh, I'm there, you know, but I've been doing it for so long that they don't even. That's just that guy that's taking pictures, you know. And you know, you shoot a little bit, you put the camera down, you shoot a little bit, you put the camera down, you go, oh my God, hold that, and then you go get the camera. I show them everything. The book is 53 pictures, and I've been shooting for 15 years. So you kill a lot of pictures, you know, and I have a gross amount of images of Cindy Lamb, the youngest girl, staring at her phone. All right, because that's all teenagers do, right? They just stare at their phone. So do I need 17 of them in a show? Do I need 17 of them in a book? No, you need one, maybe two. But it's been, you know, quite the journey. I'm always, you know, I always try to say that I'm there for 4 or 5 hours once every 2 weeks. So let's just say once a week. So clearly there's stuff going on there for 6 days and 24 hours where I'm not there. So I showed them everything. I know what's going on in their world. But I constantly am keeping in touch with them and keeping track of what's going on in their lives emotionally. But you shoot a lot of work, you try to shoot a lot of work, and then you shoot a lot of bad work. All right. So let's be honest here, right? I make a lot of really bad pictures. But I also believe in the process and knowing that eventually you will make good work, and all those bad pictures you took to get that new picture that you love, you kind of forget about that. But it is a up and down process. But I hope that answered it. I'm not too sure exactly, what you meant.
Do these photographs reveal anything of the photographer?
I think for me, the work is kind of myself. Everything is kind of based off of my experience and my memories of who I was growing up and the things that I was interested in and things that I'm interested in now. And I think any kind of photos that I make are a reflection of myself in one way or another.
I would also add to that, I would hope that every image that everyone in this room makes is hopefully some piece of you in that image, right? So you're making that work for a reason, right? You are drawn to making this body of work or this image for a reason, but it's hard. It's up to you to kind of dig in deep and try to figure that out. What is drawing you to this is just as important as what is not drawing you to that. All right. So yes, it is me. It is my, I think to go back to young man's question over there, like this project, or at least the Lambs project, is not about, in my head, a Chinese family living in their experience. It is, but it's become for me about life. All right. Life is messy. Life is not so easily scripted, right? It doesn't perfectly go like this. It's kind of all choppy and all over the place. That they were together as a married couple with 3 kids, all living together in one bed. And 15 years later, they're broken up, and mother's remarried in China right now. The father's living in Bronx, and so for me, it's moved beyond like what the Chinatown experience is. Everyone's lives are different, right? So everyone's either one apartment in Chinatown is different than the other apartment in Chinatown. So it's really, really about life. You could say it's about the American family. It's really about this, how life is can be messy.
While your intimacy with the family has opened up possibilities, it's also compromised God behind the lens. In context that you turn away from some images that you might not have.
I suppose so. I don't know if compromise is I don't know what exactly, again, you mean. I mean, you edit like crazy, and I know when I'm making images that I, again, know what's happening in their lives, perhaps right then and there. So if I make an image I like, and you look back at it and you're staring at it, and you could connect that to what's emotionally happening in the family right now, that works for me. So
In context of compromise, choose
not to photograph or not to use it.
either or.
It's choices you make, right? There's no images in my body of work that are overtly negative. The parents fought. I didn't photograph them, when they're fighting. I tried to make the image be kind of laden with emotions just by lighting, perhaps being melancholy, being dramatic with the lighting, or kind of having the atmosphere a little heavier to go that way. So I'm not strictly a documentary photographer that's going to show people arguing or looking at a bill and go, "Oh, how are we going to pay this?" It's not me. I'm just really kind of looking for small, quiet moments. But any project you make or any body of work that you're going to make, you're going to cut stuff out. You have to, right? And then if you don't, it's just a big old mess.
Josh, a complicated one, I think. The world of Chinatown, as all 3 of you have basically defined it. Can you all hear me? Has greatly changed. In New York alone, there are, I think, 4 Chinatowns. And so what we once thought 20 years ago as Chinatown could be any one of those places. Now, in the last 10 years, the influx of Chinese students, which we can see right here, into New York in particular, but not just New York, all over America, has changed the concept of Chinese in America and probably changed everybody's perception of themselves. I mean, if you walk in this neighborhood or the lower, let's say below 30th Street, there are hundreds of Chinese restaurants, hundreds of Chinese, grocery stores, a furniture store, things that were never here before. Dim sum places, ice cream parlors, small businesses, foot massage place, all over New York, not just in one location. And this happens in Madisonville, Kentucky, or what's the name of the place in Iowa? I've been there, actually. Probably ate at Jerome. I think I ate in your uncle's restaurant. I've eaten an awful lot across America because I do a lot of road trips. So I'm just wondering, from our Chinese visitors, students, those from mainland China mostly, but also Taiwan, what's your impression of all of this? It's a very different take on being Chinese than your own, I would think. That's my question.
It's for them.
It's for them.
I'll be back.
No comment? No speculation? Does it change your view of America? Does it change your view of New York, of the West? How many of the foreign students here have gone west across the United States? Few. Oh, yeah. Take the road trip.
Yes.
Interestingly, so why do you say Chinese American West are very different? Chinese American East, I'm wondering like how they're different. By the way, there's a 99 restaurant in like Kimberly. So
They're expanding. I have a perspective for you after I answer this question. So East Coast Chinese Americans tend to be part of this newer wave of immigration that came in the 80s and 90s. So we still have a lot of this immigrant mentality and things that we've built, and we hold on to a lot of things. And from my experience and the people I've encountered, we're all hoarders, and we enjoy like our life on a day-to-day basis, trying to kind of build our lives as well as possible, as opposed to a lot of the West Coast Asians. The West Coast Chinese Americans, they've kind of built out, they created what I would like to call suburban Chinatown. They have they started their lives, they built their little empires of like pharmacies and empires of supermarkets, and then they've like built this kind of Beverly Hills of Chinese people. And so there's a more affluent and generational gap in the sense where we are more separated in cultural barriers, and they might be a little more assimilated in a way, more American, quote unquote, whatever that might mean, versus us who might still eat salted fish every now and then. So does that answer your question a little bit? Will, you want to expand into this?
I think what I love about doing this is, in the end, what we strive for as a human being as well as artists is not just to talk about the one layer of Chinese American experience, but hopefully we could push the nuances where anyone who's not Chinese American could also relate to the housing situation, the rent, the different tone of the skin, and so on. But to talk about, so this is, I think it happens even in Mexican American versus people from Mexico and so on and so on. Similar to you, when I grew up, I didn't understand identity at all. I came here when I was 9 from Hong Kong. There was no such thing in my family as identity. Like, we don't even know that. And then again, my mom is super racist, but then everyone is Asian in Hong Kong. So we are super racist against the Mays, which is like the Filipino Mays, and then the Indians who work there, because they are we're 99.9 Chinese in Hong Kong. So when I came here, this is all new. and I hated being Chinese. I tried to date like a white woman, woman. And I was in 5th grade, I think, and I understand, yeah, definitely girl. I couldn't understand why she didn't like me, and maybe she just doesn't like me. But I somehow thought because I was Chinese. This was in Bensonhurst back in like really bad times with racial riots and stuff. So I hated being Chinese. So and I didn't want to associate with all that. So I went to the military. I was working in Chinatown and I hated it. My parents had like a bunch of stores in Chinatown. Hated it. I left. I was like, I hated it so much I went to the army. It's like, fuck this shit. I'm going to the army. And then I thought that would prove myself. And then now that I'm much older, I would never be American. Doesn't matter. I could be bleeding like a bald eagle with an American flag out of my arm. I would never be American. My mind could be, and I could die for my country, whatever that means. I would never be an American because there would never be enough Asian influx. Now, if you are Hispanic, maybe in 50 years' time, you might be the majority. You could play that way. But for me, at best, I will only be 5%. So I went through this full circle of hating being Chinese to like, fuck this, I'm just gonna be Chinese American. And I'm gonna let the inside like speak for myself. So yeah, I love my country. My country might not love me all the time, might not even recognize me. I'm not even in the discussion half the time. But I live in New York, and I don't worry about it. So for those who are visiting students who might be interested in O1 or not, like make this your home. Like just do it. Just make it your home, and you would never be loved 100%. But just make it a home for yourself.
Also, I have one more story to go with to answer you. So I was eating at this restaurant in San Francisco for my first trip to San Francisco in 2010, and there was this older Chinese guy sitting there, and he had a beard. He looked really like a grandfather. I ordered a salted fish minced meat pie over rice, which is like Taishanese, like soul food. And I ordered it in Chinese. So when I ordered it in Chinese, the waitress responded to me in Chinese. And then this older dude asked for his check in English. And I was blown away because his English was perfect. It was better than mine. And I was just like, what? Like, I've never heard an older Chinese person speak perfect English before. And so like, that blew my mind. It might not blow your mind right now, but like in my head, I was like, I've never seen that before. And so like, it's that generational thing of like different layers of people who have been here before us and will come after us, and all the stories that we carry through all that. Yes.
Stand up.
I don't want to stand up. I think I got a response to when you talk about like thinking about when the Spanish American become the majority, probably maybe in 50 years. So my question would be like, me as a Chinese, like brought up in mainland China, I've been spending 8 years here studying United States. And when I listen to like a Chinese American, all the information I got, I feel like people always bring up like words around Hong Kong or Taiwanese. They're like I never heard of anything about like, oh, Chinese American artist who's brought up in US from mainland. And my question would be, how do you think like having this panel today, like for students like me from mainland China, gonna react to like when we always brought up like, oh, Chinese American issue? Would that?
I guess I think that's a legitimate question. But first of all, we just so happen to be whatever demographic we are. When I saw them, I didn't know. I think there are a lot of mainland Chinese artists, if not way more than Cantonese. I don't say Cantonese, Taiwan or Hong Kong. But Hong Kong is Chinese. So there's a lot. And I've met a lot. I do a lot of student visits. I do a lot of coffee. There's definitely a lot of mainland Chinese originated artists, I guess. So when it comes to art, art is just art, right? It is, you have to tell your perspective in a way that makes sense, that would make me feel like I've learned something and feel something. So I don't think there's any barriers as an artist. And as people, I mean, when I'm in Hong Kong, there's definitely way more prejudice against mainland Chinese when I'm in Hong Kong, and vice versa. Now, there's a big thing that everyone knows for the most part, so I won't go into it. But when you're in New York City, I don't think that there's a difference. There's no prejudice among the Chinese for the most part. They might be a little, they might be in East Broadway. There's, yeah, but I mean, they're always going to be prejudiced. There's always going to be that, but I don't think it's a problem at all. Like, as an artist, as an immigrant, it's not a problem at all. So
to address that, my family's from the mainland. Like, I consider myself like Cantonese because my family's from Guangzhou. But like, at the end of the day, 我们是唐人，对不对? Like, that's how we see it, right? And so, like, I think the idea is that we kind of try to, like, my work is trying to create this connection between myself and others through my view of the world. And happily, as Cantonese folks, we just have a lot of history in America. Like, technically speaking, we kind of funded the revolution in China in 1911. But, you know, we're still just trying to figure out ourselves in an identity spectrum because we're still not really seen as part of the conversation yet.
I just want to make sure, are we answering what you're trying to get at, or is this something
Yeah,
else?
it is. And I also have a different question for him. Because I find it's really interesting, like how you see yourself in relationship between being the photographer to document the family, and at the same time, I feel like you're engaging with this family for so long, so you're kind of like the uncle for the kids. So how do you, like, when you end up like making the book, how do you make the decision when you choose the photos? Because you mentioned you would photograph when the couples are fighting. So could you talk more about that?
You know, ultimately, I think photography is going to be about. Ultimately, I think photography is storytelling, narrative. I knew pretty well what the narrative was going on in the family, and I wanted to make sure that the pictures reflected that. And so when it was time to put the book together, I wanted to make sure that the photographs flowed, and the narrative was pushed forward. All right, I always want my photograph to push the narrative forward, and especially if you do a book. You know, the photo, Charles is the master of this, right? The photograph on page 25, guess what? That was, you know, influenced by the photographs from 1 to page 24. All right. So I wanted to make sure that the photograph resonated with the narrative. You push the narrative forward, you cut a lot out. You don't want to overdo it. I've seen way too many photo books that have way too many pictures. I mean, Cartier-Bresson's my favorite photographer, maybe of all time, and I get bored after 50 pictures. So if I get bored of this guy after 50, you're going to get bored of my work after 80, right? 50 also, right? 30. So, yeah, you got to look at your work, and you got to dig into a little bit and figure out what the narrative that you want to say is in your work, and look at each photograph and see how that pushes the narrative forward. And then you do edit a lot out, and sometimes not sometimes you do. You have to, you know, kill some of them sometimes. You know, I could do a B-sides book, you know. So I had a small show last year that was this on Cindy. All right. I mean, it was really small. So I mean, I could do just a book on her. Maybe that's next. Who knows? But I would say for all the photographers in here, which I would assume is everybody, you know, think deeply, write about what you want to say with your images, and then see how those images do that. And then the ones that don't do that, the ones that are weaker, you get them out, you know. Just keep the strongest images in there.
Thank you.
I'm just going to play teacher. First of all, I want to thank the two who know me the best, so for all the compliments. But this faculty is a family, and everybody who's here and teaches and taught them contributed to their success. Photography is the art of what you leave out. And the truth is, and I'm going to be a little bit strong here. Most of you just simply don't make enough imagery to leave anything out. You don't work every day enough. You don't shoot. And those of you using film, stop it. You know why, don't you? It costs too much and you don't shoot enough. You're afraid to spend the money. It's an economic problem. Huh? Well, if you can afford it, fine, but you got to pay for the development. You got to pay for all the printing and all the scanning. Give yourself a break. Spend the time you went to the store to buy the film and go out and shoot digitally. I'm serious about this. They can't leave it out if you don't have enough to leave out. And most of you don't. That's why you're still students. Boy, that was nasty, wasn't it? When you're not a student, you will know what I'm saying. This is your life. Make pictures, make imagery, make film. By film, I mean video. Shoot. See it in your mind's eye. Make it in your mind's eye and live it every day. But you got to have something enough to leave out. And just because you're making it big ain't going to make it better. Nor if you make it red isn't necessarily going to be better, though the light on the door was pretty good.
I would add, all the photographs you make, shoot as much as you can. The best way to become a better photographer, shoot. You're going to
within the field.
Let me just digest the question a little bit because let me just make one statement to counter what they just said earlier because I just don't have enough brain cells. I find there's two types of people who come to this program. Usually the younger student trying to find themselves, and then the older students trying to reinvent themselves. So I agree with everything they talk about, but there's nothing wrong with being 23, 25, and really be on your own for the first time. If that's the case for you, find that life for you. And then 10 years afterwards, you would reinvent that again if it doesn't work out. That has happened to me. Hi, Candace. I think I try to look for things that are needed. I don't necessarily look for things that are Chinese American, but it just so happened to be something I know more than anything else. I know two things. I know the military pretty good. I love being in the military. By birth, I'm Chinese. And so these are the two things I know the most. So when I found, in this exhibition, it was Tom, An Rong, and Annie Ling. All three of them was someone I sought out years ago to try to make a book with. And it just so happened that they also were validated as the most important people to talk about this topic. So I love The Lambs of Ludlow Street. And to be honest, there were two reasons why I went to grad school from FIT. Thomas Holton's work was one of them. But I can't do what Thomas is doing. I don't have 15 years to do it. I don't. So I'll let Tom do it. And he's better at it. So if, in the Army, I was taught to lead when I'm supposed to lead and follow when I'm supposed to follow. Same thing with An Rong. I saw in him exactly the type of image I want to make, the yearning for love, for identity, the romanticized story of what an Asian American should be. Let me know if this is... And he could do it better than me. He's a way better photographer than me. So I'm going to support him just the same way I supported Tom. And I've supported many other people. And in the process of giving, I've gotten a lot of people around me. I found myself in a circle of people who's willing to listen to me, come to me, and help me. I've been nominated for awards. A lot of it is because of networking, because they know me. If there's two books equally good, I want that guy who's always been helping people to get nominated. And it does happen that way. Networking does happen that way. People get shows, get awards because they know you. So I don't necessarily try to focus on it, but this just happened to be what I know. And if whatever you know, go for it and figure it out and be willing to follow and give. And eventually you would get back. And that sounds like a Hallmark special, doesn't it? I hope that answers your question.
Can I go in on that?
Yeah.
I think as a person who I consider like I have a bicultural identity. So I think for me to be Chinese American, like that's a privilege. That's like something I'm thankful for. And part of that is that I am privileged in the sense that I can tell the story of my people and be able to do it with my full authorship and full identity and my own authenticity into it and be able to share my story. And that's what we need more in the world, people being authentic with themselves and people being willing to share their own stories. And that's how we connect as people. And I think that's the big power of being like the Chinese American and like making art within that as a person of the diaspora.
I have a question for Thomas. So for the family, you shoot the photos for over 10 years. So I'm wondering that when did they started to trust you, and have you encountered any problem? Like they said, you have been stay here for so many times. For like for like so many times, and I don't want you to like a stranger to say I'm at home to take the photos.
I often tell people that I think I got very, very, very lucky. How did you find the lambs? I did not find them. I just got very lucky. All right. People helped me out. I made phone calls. I got lucky. They found me. They chose me a little bit because I was friendly and I was there. I also will be 100% honest when I say like they had three small children when I met them, 6, 5, and 2. And I was like a babysitter. And let's be right. So I'll be honest with you. The mother's like cooking and cleaning and all that. And this guy is entertaining my children. Thank you very much. All right. I have a child too, right? I wish someone came to my house and entertained my child while I could just do some other stuff. So I got very lucky that the kids were the age that they were because I provided a distraction. Right. And then I was able to help, pick them up at the school and stuff. I used to pick them up at school and they would see me and they wouldn't even go like, why is he here? They'd just see me and be like, oh, pick up the backpack. Tom's here. Let's go. So they got to trust me pretty early on. I would say you have to it's a two-way street. I brought photos back to them after the first week, and I'd make some prints here and then bring them back and to show them that you're an honest person, that you're not, again, just trying to, show a picture and just get a pat on the back and have Charlie tell you he likes it or that it's a zinger. Right. So, they started trusting me right away. Not right away. I mean, within a couple months, I was there all the time. And they just are also very open people. And so I got very, very, very lucky. People always, I still shoot. I slow down. People are like, why don't you do it with another family, Tom? It's like, you can't reproduce that. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to go to that apartment over there and do it, But hope that answers your question. It was, very lucky, and I smile, I'm friendly.
Thank you. Can I
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I just we have one more. Anyone? We're just gonna take maybe 1, 2. Anyone else? 3, 4. Okay, we keep going then.
That's why I pay you guys the big bucks.
Okay, I'm kind of want to respond to what Charlie just asked about the question. And to me, because my work is basically about the Chinese in American, not Chinese Americans, a little different. But to me, the Chinese, that group, the Chinese American, they're like a totally isolated community because my work is basically in the Flushing, Queens, and all of them, most of them, like barely come out of the Flushing, and also they don't know any English, so that's why and a huge culture gap, so that's why they only hang out with Chinese, and they only eat Chinese food. Even if they're living in America, they're not America, they're totally Chinese. So to me, I'm always confused about why are those people came to America, because it costs a lot to spend their life in America, but I don't see the gain and the cost are in a the even. Sorry, sorry about the language. And also, that's one of the questions I'm always confused about. And I heard that you just said you have some perspective about this question, so I'd love to hear about that.
So it all comes down to the idea of like soft power. America controlled a lot of soft power throughout since the 50s, and it's only slowly turning now. But America did a really good job selling this idea: come here and like live your dream. Like in Chinese, like a lot of people still call San Francisco Jingsan, which is Gold Mountain. Like when you call a place Golden Mountain, people want to freaking go, right? So this idea is that it's been so romanticized that a lot of Chinese people that I've encountered, they see this as a land of opportunity, a land of freedom and their chance to make it in life. But as the world turns, we are seeing China go through a huge economic revival, and it's surpassing America, really. And the thing is, you are coming in at a time where you're seeing a lot of these like Chinese folks who who only live in Flushing, who don't leave there, and that's because they feel safe there. We try, like anybody in regards to just feeling safe, they will do anything to feel safe and be safe. And leaving that little community for them, it's terrifying. And so they built their lives in these little communities. But it's also because of historical reasons. Like Chinatowns were built for a reason. It's because nobody else wanted to live in those areas. Nobody wanted to live down in where Chinatown was back in the 1800s. Like that was a filthy swamp at some point. And the Chinese folks were like, we're going to build our lives here because nobody else is going to bother us. And we're okay with it, And so it's because of all these little layers of history that go into it. I was recently in Taiwan, and I was getting my hair cut, and this the lady's like, she's cutting my hair, and she's like, "Oh, where are you from?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm from New York," and she's like, "Oh, I have a friend who moved to New York in the 80s, and she opened a barbershop there too, and she told me how much she made, and I told her, and she was like, "Oh, you should come to America," and she's like, "Oh, you know what? I make a little less than that in Taiwan, and I'm pretty comfortable here, so I don't need to go there." And that was the 80s. Taiwan was doing amazing with their economy at that time. They had manufacturing and all that, and then all of a sudden, mainland China took it. Well, so then things change, and so because of that, there's this perspective that you see things differently. I think having spent the last 3 months in Asia, when I came back to New York, I felt like I entered post-Soviet Russia. America feels like a third world country at times. The subway is a third world country subway. So that was answering Charlie's question earlier.
I have a question for Thomas, and maybe it's not related to photography, because after 15 years, you get really close to the family, and when they're fighting, you may feel bad as well. So how to handle this? As a photographer, as a friend, will that be a problem actually? Because even I want to take photograph of my family. Sometimes I encounter these problems, the embarrassing moments, or afraid of taking pictures. I don't know if you have same feelings.
I would not shoot when they were fighting, and it wouldn't be we're not talking brawling on the ground or anything. Just be for Chinese people, they just raise their voice a little bit and just shout, right? And so I would not photograph, but then be there. I would sit with the kids, make sure they're okay. And, you still sit there like this a little bit while they're fighting. and then I would photograph sometimes the aftermath. So after a fight, the atmosphere is going to be heavier in the house, and you can see that in just people's faces and just the tone and stuff like that. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't have, we're not talking, physical fights or anything, but as a photographer, I wanted to make work that's a little subtler, right? Pull back a little bit, right? Open-ended narrative, all those words you hear in the school. So if it's somber lighting with a little bit of a little bit of heavier tone in the facial expressions, I think that's at least for me, that's a more interesting way of talking about heaviness in a family than actually seeing a fight or something like that, right? Or seeing, mouths, twisted and, yelling at each other. That's just not who I was as a photographer. Some photographers do that. I wanted to be a little bit more subtle and pulled back a little bit. And also, to be honest, I feel a little weird taking some of those pictures, But if it was in between fights and they were sitting there, staring at each other or staring at the floor after arguing, I would shoot a little bit. And I have pictures like that, But it's a type of photographer I am. I just don't necessarily think you have to put every single thing into the photograph. And I think if you pull back a little bit, it's more interesting.
So basically, you won't interfere too much. Just let the life happen as if it.
Hi.
Oh,
I'm 3-year student, and this is my second year. And I'm really we all have the problem. I'm from Taiwan, and then we all have a problem after graduate, one more year for OPT, then O1 visa. So I'm really curious about how you. I know you don't have the visa, but your first job after you graduate from this program, and how you maintain your need. Maybe you need to work full-time job for pay your bill, but also you need to build up your art career. And that's it. Thank you.
I started teaching while going to school here. So I started teaching on days I did not have school. So, you have classes at night or afternoon, but I had Wednesdays off. I don't even remember what day it was. So I started teaching while I was here. And that's what I do now. I full-time teach. So when I graduated, guess what? I only want to do the personal work that I want to make. So I started teaching full-time. I actually taught 4 different places part-time. I'm full-time now. But if you want to make the work that you want to make, you have to figure it out. That's called unemployment, sadly, unfortunately. But I teach. But I started teaching when I was here.
I think because of your situation as being a student on a student visa, you can't actually work while you're here, technically speaking. There's a lot of off the books you can do. So the thing with that is I'm just gonna admit it, my folks gave me a really good spot in life. They were able to buy a house, able to let me live in their basement till I was 25. And so I was able to live that life because of them. And I'm thankful every day for it. But what I started doing while I was in school, I was actually a camp counselor. I would teach kids after school, and I would teach kids during the summer. And then I picked up an artist in residency after I graduated, and I did that for a year. Almost died because I got into a bike accident, and then I came back to New York, and then I started assisting, ended up getting an internship at Time Magazine, and then I just kind of started building my work on all the spare time that I had. And easiest way for visa stuff is to get a full-time job, but you might not like the job. But, if you are dedicated enough to what you want to do, and if it's here that you want to pursue it, then you're going to do what you need to do to stay here, right? But I do really like Taiwan, so I do recommend. The Asia world is a wide open world right now, and I think it's really fascinating to actually work in Asia at the moment. And I think things are changing, and all the soft power is really moving that way now. So think about that.
I do want to answer this. For the few of you here that do want to consider staying, don't wait until you graduate or your OPT to start thinking about it. Me and you actually have exchanged a lot of emails about this. So the first question you got to ask, okay, do you want to stay? Can you afford to stay? And even if you get to stay after OPT, you do a 3-year O1 and then maybe another O1 or maybe EB1. And in this process, how are you going to live? If you're 25 today, at the end of this process, you might be 31. Do you want to have a roommate for 7 years, for 10 years? You have to think about that. So if you do decide that you want to have this available to you, you need to build your CV now. Your CV is exceptional talent, I think it's called, and you have to build that CV now. That includes your exhibition, your press, and assuming you have it all good and ready to go, there's still a lawyer's fee. So it could be $10,000. And so there's no guarantee. Now, you could think about paying that money 2 years from now or 1 year after you graduate, but you cannot go backward and do your CV. There's just no such thing. So you have to do it now. It's hard enough to make good work, but then you also have to make good work while you are kind of stuffing your CV with all these like miscellaneous entry, and you need that. So for anyone who would even remotely consider staying in this country after your graduation, build your CV now.
Creative writing.
I'm doing another school. Good job.
No, I meant for your CV.
Creative writing.
Yeah. So I have some question for An Rong. So you mentioned earlier that you took a different approach than Thomas do to understand Chinese American. So how close were you with the photo subject, and why do you take this different approach? And I also know that you are now based in Taiwan and America. So why do you choose to stay in both Asia and America after exploring your identity as a Chinese American?
So I made a promise to myself that I needed to finish this project of my Americans, and that I wanted to finish it with 88 photographs, which is kind of crazy sounding right now, but I'm at 40/50 and I'm ready to push forward. So that's the one thing that's really keeping me in America while also my folks are here. So I think with my approach to subjects, I make friends and I'll try to photograph them. And if there's something more, I'll keep going. But for the most part, I kind of just bounce around and kind of am a vagabond about it. And that for me, the Chinese American experience is about kind of moving around and finding myself within all these different people. That's been my approach. For example, the photo of the woman who was getting married, that was just totally random, that my mom tried to set me up with her. And I can't really, I wouldn't have gotten access if she wasn't hey, we're friends, right? So, so those are little things that happen that I find myself in. And I spent a lot of time in Taiwan, one, because my wife is from Taiwan. Two, because I really think the future is in Asia. And as I've spent more time in Asia for myself, I really realized that I've had a huge empty part of myself growing up here, not knowing what my Chinese culture was. And it's like I was learning who I was through a translator who couldn't speak English. And so I had to understand Chinese culture through a sifting mechanism that wasn't really letting everything through. And so now that I'm learning more about it, I'm oh crap, now I know why we do this, why we do that, and why we celebrate on certain occasions. And so I'm spending more time there also just because I'm feeling more understanding of who I am because of my time there. And so, yeah, that's why. Did I answer your question?
We have to end this, but first of all, is it on? Yeah. This has been really very edifying, I think, for everybody in various different ways. And just a few remarks from what I've learned. I mean, the experience that each of these people expressed, and that also is being expressed from the audience, is, that there's difference and you're alienated in some ways and you're not sure who you are. And I think that probably crosses all human beings in some way, particularly when you move from one place to another, or you're settled in one place and you discover there's another place, irrespective of whether Chinese, Japanese, black, white, whatever. The separations are more a matter, frankly, of economic differences than racial or other issues at this point in the world. The haves and the have-nots. And this is my opinion. I'm only giving an opinion. And the great discrepancy in wealth between the very wealthy and what once was a middle class that existed, at least in this country and in other countries as well, that is dwindling. So I think, particularly for the young people, you're going to go through all these identity crises, believe it or not, white, Jewish, American. I had that crisis, maybe not as great as some others, but I had it too, growing up in the South. And I'm only saying that because all of these ethnic aspirations that have come to America have had these problems. The hatred of the German Jews, of the Russian Jews, the Southern Italians, and the Northern Italians, whatever, Taiwanese, mainland, Hong Kong, American Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, mixing differences. This has always gone on, and frankly, the Lower East Side, Chinatown, and all that's from really 14th Street south has undergone this for 200 years, different ethnic groups mixing. The real truth is we don't exist in what they call the salad bowl, where our differences are distinct. We're all being pushed into a big blender and made into a mush. We dress alike, we don't quite look alike, but we will one day. And the world is flat. And frankly, I think what you said, opportunity exists where you make opportunity. And a lot of the students here who are from mainland China and Taiwan or wherever, Korean, you have so many opportunities, particularly with the multi-languages that you hold, that American students don't have, actually, because we only speak basically one language. And you also have opportunities because you're so engaged in thinking visually with new technology. That's one of the reasons I keep saying this about film. Embrace everything that the technology has to offer you. Learn it. Know about it. Don't have to practice all of it, because the world's going to change so goddamn fast. And what you thought made sense for your artistic practice may not make any sense 5 years from now as a way of doing it. You have to be true to yourself. You have to find out who you are. You have to make work. The late, what's his name, who just died, Chanel. What did he say? You want ideas? You want to learn? Go to work. Go to work. That's what he said. You all saw it? You'll get there. It's not going to be willed to you. It's not going to be somebody going, oh, this is the path. He can't tell you the path. I can't tell it. If you work and you want it, you'll find it. That I promise. And I'm not being Pollyanna. You just simply have to engage it with all of your energy, all of your creativity, and with honesty. When someone asks him, whether he going to photograph the sordid things or the fights, everybody has a way of doing it. There is a reason to do that if that's what you need to do. You do have to be brave to be a photographer or to be an image maker or to be an artist. By that, you have to take risks. You got to hold your nose and do it. If you overthink it, And if you hold back because you think someone won't like it or they'll say no, it's like never getting the first date. If you don't ask, you might not ever get the date. You might get slapped too, but you know that. So dive in there. Don't worry about it. Just do it. Yeah, a lot of you have money problems. A lot of you, worry about the OPT. Doesn't matter. Go back to where you came from. You'll find an opportunity there. You will. You know my nephew. You know about my nephew. You know my nephew? Huh? Danny. Yeah. He's Chinese American. He's a Jew Asian. Not your kind of Jew. He went to China for 9 years and built his whole career that way. Lived in Beijing and Shanghai. Mother's Chinese. Don't worry about it. Learn your craft. Learn your ideas. Develop your intellect. Don't stay in one pack. That a lot of you do. I'm talking to the Chinese. There's hamburger restaurants out there. There are other places other than Chinese restaurants. There are other communities in this city you've never visited. I don't see a lot of you at that table out there. And this goes for the American students and the Latin students here and the South American students. Mix up. Take each other to the movies. Goodbye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.